every Omega who had ever tried to touch King Aldrich Ravenshield ended up in tears. Not because he was cruel, though he could be. Not because he was heartless, though many believed he was. But because the most powerful man in the northern kingdoms, the warrior king who controlled half the realm's armies and all of its crucial trade routes, had never, not once, in his 32 winters of life, looked at an Omega with anything other than cold, empty indifference. His own mother once said his heart was made of black ice. His enemies said he had no heart at all. Throne rooms trembled when he entered. Lords twice his age bowed their heads. Beautiful Omegas, nobles' daughters, visiting princesses, daughters of powerful merchants, they threw themselves at him at every feast, every alliance meeting, every carefully arranged introduction their desperate fathers orchestrated. And every single time, Aldrich would look through them like they were glass, like they were nothing. So when Alara Ashford, a 24-year-old healer's apprentice from the borderlands with dark curls, sun-kissed skin, and absolutely no idea who he really was, collapsed at his feet in the middle of the Royal Market Square on her first day in the capital, blood seeping through her fingers from a wound she was trying to hide, and then looked up at him with those wide, fearless amber eyes and whispered, "Please, I just need to get to the healer's quarter. I can make it. I just need—" Nobody in that crowded market could have predicted what happened next. King Aldrich Ravenshield, the man who never smiled, the man who never stopped for anyone, the man whose expression hadn't changed in public in over a decade, dropped to his knees beside her and felt his cold, dead heart do something it had never done before. It moved. If you are already hooked by this story, go ahead and smash that subscribe button right now, because trust me, you do not want to miss what happens next. The Royal Market Square of Thornhaven was a cathedral of stone and sound. The capital city's heart, where merchants hawked wares, guards patrolled with vigilant eyes, and commoners moved through the space in careful, anxious rhythms. Their voices low, their steps quick. Nobody lingered too long. Nobody laughed too loudly, because the energy of the capital always reflected the mood of the man who ruled it. And King Aldrich Ravenshield's mood was perpetually winter. Alara didn't know any of this. She didn't know that the man standing in front of her, the one she had just bled all over, was the reason half the people in this city went home every night and prayed the kingdom stayed at peace. She didn't know that behind the perfectly fitted black armor, the sharp jaw, the ice-blue eyes that could cut through steel, was a man who ruled an empire that had been built on blood and conquest. She only knew that she had traveled for 3 days to reach this city, that she was late for her apprenticeship at the Royal Healing Halls, that the bandage covering the knife wound on her side from the bandits who'd attacked her caravan had come loose, and now she was bleeding through her healer's robes in the middle of the market square. And the most devastatingly handsome man she had ever seen in her life was staring at her like she had just shattered something fundamental about his understanding of the world. "I'm sorry," she said, her vision swimming. "I just need— the healing quarter is near the palace, yes? I can make it if I just—" She tried to stand. Her legs gave out immediately. Aldrich moved without thinking, an instinct that overrode years of carefully maintained distance. He caught her before she hit the cobblestones. The entire market square went silent. 2 guards exchanged a glance of pure shock. A merchant nearly dropped his entire cart of apples. Because in 12 years of rule, nobody had ever seen King Aldrich Ravenshield touch an Omega. Not once. Not ever. Alara's head lolled against his chest, her breathing shallow. Up close, he could see the pain etched in her features, the way her teeth were clenched against agony, the determination in her eyes even as consciousness threatened to slip away. "You're bleeding," he said, his voice low and rough from disuse in gentle conversation. "Brilliant observation," she managed, a weak smile touching her lips despite the pain. "Are you a healer too? Or just stating the obvious?" Something cracked inside his chest. When was the last time someone had spoken to him with anything other than fear or formal reverence? His personal guard, Sir Gareth, stepped forward with a frown. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should call for the royal physicians." "Your Majesty?" Alara's eyes widened. She tried to pull away from him, fresh panic flooding her features. "Oh gods, you're the king. I bled on the king. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean... Stop talking, Aldrich said, but his voice was gentler than he'd intended. You're making it worse. He looked at Gareth. Get the carriage. Now. Your Majesty, the protocol for touching you without permission. She's unconscious and bleeding. Do you think she's going to assassinate me with her blood loss? Aldrich's voice carried that edge of command that made kingdoms bend. Get the carriage. Gareth ran. Alara's eyes were fighting to stay open. I really didn't mean to bleed on royalty. That's probably definitely against some law. What happened to you? Aldrich asked, carefully adjusting his hold on her to avoid the wound at her side. Bandits. On the northern road. 3 days ago. They wanted our supplies. Our healer fought them off, but I got cut. I thought I could make it to the city before... She swallowed hard. Before it got infected. Turns out I was wrong. Aldrich's jaw tightened. The northern road was supposed to be patrolled, protected. Someone had failed at their duty, and this woman, this Omega who looked at him like he was just a person and not a weapon, had nearly died because of it. What's your name? He asked. Alara Ashford. I'm supposed to start my apprenticeship at the Royal Healing Halls today. I'm late. Master Godfrey is going to kill me. Well, if the infection doesn't kill me first. Despite everything, the blood, the market crowd staring, the fundamental wrongness of the situation, Aldrich found himself almost smiling. Almost. Master Godfrey can wait, he said. The royal carriage arrived, black and gold, pulled by 6 white horses. Aldrich carried Alara to it himself, ignoring the gasps, the whispers, the way every person in the market square was watching history being made. As he settled her onto the velvet seats, her hand caught his wrist. Her grip was weak, but her eyes were clear. Thank you, she whispered, for not leaving me there. Something in his chest cracked wider. Don't thank me yet, he said quietly. Just don't die. Then the carriage door closed between them, and Aldrich stood in the market square, staring at the blood on his hands, her blood, and feeling like a man who had just discovered that the thing he'd been searching for his entire life had been lying bleeding on the cobblestones. Now, if you are loving this story so far, go ahead and hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what you think is going to happen next, because this story is about to take a turn that none of you are ready for. Alara woke in a room that was far too beautiful to be the apprentice's quarters. Silk curtains, a 4-poster bed, walls hung with tapestries depicting ancient battles, and sitting in a chair by the window, reading what appeared to be a medical text with intense concentration, was the king. She must have made a sound because his head snapped up immediately. You're awake, he said. I'm in the palace, she said, her voice hoarse. In what looks like a guest chamber. A very nice guest chamber. You're in the East Wing. The royal physicians have been monitoring you for 3 days. 3 days? Alara tried to sit up, winced, and immediately felt his hand on her shoulder, gently but firmly pressing her back down. Don't, he said. The infection was severe. You nearly died, twice. Master Godfrey says you're not to move for at least another week. Master Godfrey was here? He's been here every day, yelling at me about letting his new apprentice almost die before she even started. Apparently, you come very highly recommended. Alara stared at him. Why are you here? It was a bold question, the kind that could get a commoner thrown in the dungeons for impertinence. But Aldrich just looked at her with those ice-blue eyes that seemed less cold than they had in the market square. I don't know, he admitted, and the honesty of it hung in the air between them like something fragile and new. Over the next 2 weeks, a strange routine developed. Alara recovered under the care of the royal physicians. The wound healed cleanly, leaving only a thin scar that Master Godfrey grumbled about, but acknowledged was excellent work by his standards. And every evening, without fail, King Aldrich Ravenshield appeared in her room. At first it was under the pretense of checking on her recovery. Then it became conversations about the healing arts. He was surprisingly knowledgeable about battlefield medicine. Then it became something else. Something neither of them could quite name. Tell me about where you're from, he said one evening, sitting in his usual chair while she practiced mixing healing poultices under Master Godfrey's strict instructions. The borderlands are nothing like the capital. Alara said, grinding herbs with steady movements. Smaller, quieter. Everyone knows everyone. When someone gets hurt, the whole village brings food. When someone dies, the whole village mourns. It sounds... He paused, searching for a word. Warm. It is. Was. She looked up at him. What about you? What was it like growing up as a prince? His expression shuddered immediately. Cold. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Alara set down her pestle and mortar. My mother used to say that people who build the highest walls are usually protecting the deepest wounds. Aldrich stared at her. Your mother sounds wise. She was. Is. I hope. I haven't seen her since I left for the capital. You'll see her again, he said with the quiet certainty of someone who could make it happen with a word. Tell me one thing about your childhood, Alara pressed. One real thing, not the official version everyone knows. He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, my father was murdered when I was 19, poisoned by someone we trusted, someone who sat at our table, who called me nephew. I took the throne the next day. I didn't have time to grieve. I didn't have time to be young. I had to become someone that no one would ever dare betray again. And that meant becoming someone no one could get close to, Alara finished softly. He nodded. If no one is close, no one can be a threat. That sounds lonely. It is. The honesty of it cracked something open between them. Alara crossed the room and sat on the footstool near his chair, close, but not touching. She had learned that Aldrich didn't like to be touched. It made him stiffen, made his walls slam back into place. But right now, sitting in the candlelight of her recovery room, those walls looked less solid than usual. You don't have to be lonely tonight, she said quietly. He looked at their hands, hers resting on her knee, his gripping the arm of his chair. The space between them was maybe 6 inches. It might as well have been miles. Alara, he said, and the way he said her name, like it was something sacred, made her heart ache. You should know something about me before this. Before whatever this goes any further. I'm listening. I'm not just a king. My family built this kingdom on blood. There are people who want me dead. Want the throne. Being close to me puts you at risk. Terrible risk. Are you trying to scare me away? I'm trying to be honest with you. Something I don't do with most people. Alara studied him. The tension in his shoulders. The way his knuckles were white on the chair arm. The conflict in his eyes. I'm not easy to scare, she said. I grew up on the borderlands. I've dealt with raiders, plague, winter famines. I came to this city to become a healer, to help people, knowing full well I might die doing it. Whatever you think is going to make me run, you don't know me well enough yet. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise. Admiration. And underneath it all, a desperate, aching hope. Yet, he repeated, catching the word, that implies you're planning to let me know you. That depends. Are you going to keep appearing in my room every evening like some mysterious shadow king? Or are you going to ask me to dinner like a normal person? For the first time, King Aldrich Ravenshield smiled. Really smiled. It was small. It was brief. But it transformed his entire face, cracking through the ice and revealing something warm beneath. Have dinner with me, he said. When? Tonight. He led her to a private dining chamber she hadn't known existed. A small room with a fireplace, a table set for 2, and windows overlooking the palace gardens. They talked for 4 hours. He asked about her training, about healing techniques, about what made her want to become a healer. She asked about ruling a kingdom, about the weight of a crown, about what made a good king versus a feared one. My father believed in ruling through strength, Aldrich said, staring into his wineglass. Show no weakness. Make no allowances. The moment you appear soft, you invite challenge. And you, what do you believe? I believed the same thing. For 12 years I believed it absolutely. But? He looked at her. But then an Omega collapsed at my feet in the market square and looked at me like I was just a man. Not a monster. Not a weapon. Just a person. And I realized I'd forgotten what that felt like. Alara reached across the table. Her fingers stopped just short of his hand, giving him the choice. He stared at her hand like it was a miracle, like it was a weapon, like it was both. Then slowly, his fingers moved to meet hers. The touch was electric, warm, terrifying. "You're the first person who's made me want to be something other than what I am," he said quietly. "I don't want you to be something else," Alara said. "I just want you to let yourself be human, at least when we're alone." They didn't kiss that night, but when he walked her back to her chamber and their hands lingered at the door, the look in his eyes promised something neither of them was ready to name yet. Over the next month, Alara began her formal apprenticeship with Master Godfrey, while continuing her secret meetings with Aldrich. Secret because the court could not know. Not yet. The optics of a king courting a common-born Omega healer would create chaos. And the deeper, darker reasons, the political machinations, the potential for enemies to use her against him, made secrecy essential. So they met in stolen moments. Late evenings in the private garden. Early mornings in the library before anyone else woke. Messages delivered through trusted servants. "Are you working late again?" He sent via Gareth one evening at midnight. "Master Godfrey wants me to memorize every poison antidote in existence. I'll be here until dawn. I'll have a word with him." "Don't you dare! I don't need my secret king fighting my battles with my mentor." There was a pause. Then, "Secret King. I like that title. Don't take it back." She pressed the parchment against her chest and smiled so hard her cheeks hurt. But paradise, as it always does, came with a serpent. Her name was Lady Cassandra Blackwood, and she was the daughter of Duke Blackwood, the second most powerful noble family in the kingdom, and the crown's oldest rival. Cassandra was stunning in the way winter was stunning. Beautiful, sharp, capable of killing you if you weren't careful. She had golden hair, porcelain skin, and eyes that calculated the value of everything they looked at. For years she had pursued Aldrich with relentless determination. Not because she loved him, but because a union between the Blackwood and Ravenshield families would create a power block so absolute that no one could ever challenge them. Aldrich had rejected her every single time. Coldly, completely, without negotiation. But Cassandra was not a woman who accepted rejection. She arrived at the palace on an autumn morning, unannounced, in a dress of crimson silk and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She walked past guards who knew better than to stop her, past courtiers who bowed, and directly into Aldrich's private study. He looked up from the treaty he was reviewing. His expression didn't change. "You weren't invited." "I don't need invitations. Our families have an understanding." "Our families have a history of rivalry and bloodshed. That's not an understanding." Cassandra sat gracefully in the chair across from him. "My father wants to discuss an alliance, a marriage alliance, between you and me." "No. You didn't even consider it. There's nothing to consider." Cassandra's eyes narrowed. She was used to his rejection, but something was different today. There was a softness around his edges, a distraction in his gaze. Predators notice change. She was an excellent predator. "Something is different about you," she said slowly. "You're usually cold. Today you're just distant. Those are two very different things. Leave, Cassandra." "Who is she?" The question landed like a blade. Aldrich's expression didn't crack, but his silence lasted half a second too long. That was all Cassandra needed. She smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Interesting," she whispered. "The Ice King finally melted. I wonder for whom." She stood, smoothed her dress, and walked to the door. Before she left, she turned back. "I always get what I want, Aldrich. Always, and whatever little distraction you've found, I promise she won't last." The door closed. Aldrich sat in the silence, his jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. He pulled out a parchment and wrote quickly, "Double the guards on the healing halls. Lady Cassandra knows something." Gareth's response came within the hour, How much? Enough. The first incident happened 3 days later. Alara was walking back to the healing halls from the apothecary in the lower city when she noticed a carriage following her. It moved slowly, matching her pace exactly, its curtains drawn. Her instincts, sharpened by years in the borderlands, where you learned to watch your surroundings, or you didn't survive, kicked in. She didn't run. She didn't panic. She turned down a side alley, then another, then ducked into a tavern and sent a message through the barkeep to the palace. Within minutes, Gareth arrived with 6 armed guards. That night, Aldrich appeared at her door. When she opened it, she saw something on his face she'd never seen before. Fear. Not for himself. For her. You need to tell me the truth, she said, standing in the doorway of her small room at the healing halls. All of it. Right now. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he stepped inside, closed the door, and told her everything. He told her about the assassination attempts he'd survived, the rival noble houses that wanted his throne, the neighboring kingdoms that saw his rule as a threat. He told her about his father's murder, about the betrayal by his uncle Lord Theron, who had sold the king's location to assassins in exchange for land in the northern territories. He told her about the revenge he took when he was 20, revenge so thorough and brutal that it cemented his reputation as someone who should never be crossed. And he told her about Cassandra. She wants a political marriage, he said, sitting on the edge of her bed, his elbows on his knees. Her father is pressuring the council. If I refuse, they'll cause problems. Question my ability to rule, maybe even support a challenger. People like me, Alara said quietly. He looked up, and his eyes were haunted in a way that broke her heart. I should have stayed away from you, he whispered. I knew what I was. I knew what being near me would mean. But when you collapsed at my feet and looked at me like I was worth saving, I couldn't... His voice cracked. I couldn't walk away. Alara knelt in front of him and took his face in her hands. He closed his eyes at her touch, like it was the first gentle thing he'd felt in years. Look at me, she said. He opened his eyes. I am not some fragile thing that needs to be protected from the truth. I am not going to run because your life is complicated. I knew you were dangerous the moment I met you, and I still let you carry me to that carriage. I still had dinner with you. I still fell for you. She leaned her forehead against his. So don't you dare try to push me away to keep me safe. I am standing right here, and I am choosing you. All of you. Even the parts you think are too dark for someone like me to love. Something shattered behind his eyes. The last wall. The final defense. He pulled her into his arms so hard she gasped. He buried his face in her neck, and his entire body trembled. She held him. She ran her fingers through his hair. She whispered that it was okay, that he was safe, that she was here. And for the first time in his life, King Aldrich Ravenshield believed it. That night changed everything between them. They fell asleep tangled together on her small bed, foreheads touching, hands intertwined. When dawn came, he didn't leave. He traced the scar on her side where the bandits had cut her, and she pressed her lips to the scar on his shoulder from the assassination attempt when he was 21. Stay, she whispered. I'm not going anywhere, he said. But safety in Aldrich's world was always temporary. Cassandra moved fast. Within a week she had discovered everything. She had spies in the palace, servants who reported back to the Blackwood family. Through them she learned about the healer's apprentice, the girl with the dark curls and the warm smile, who had somehow done what no woman in the kingdom had ever managed to do. She was furious, not heartbroken. Cassandra didn't love Aldrich. She loved power. And Alara was standing between her and the throne. The attack came on a market day. Alara was purchasing herbs when 2 men in dark cloaks stepped out of an alley and blocked her path. Miss Ashford, one said in a low voice, Lady Cassandra would like to speak with you. I don't know any Lady Cassandra. That wasn't a request. Alara felt ice in her veins, but she kept her face neutral. If she wants to talk, she can make an appointment at the healing halls. She tried to step around them. One grabbed her arm. Hard. The next 3 seconds happened so fast Alara would later struggle to remember them clearly. There was a blur of motion. The man holding her was suddenly on the ground, his arm bent at an unnatural angle. The second man reached for a blade, but a fist connected with his jaw so hard his head snapped back. Gareth stood over both of them, breathing hard, his knuckles bleeding. Behind him, 3 more royal guards formed a protective wall. "You all right?" Gareth asked. "Yes," Alara managed. "Yes, I'm fine." A messenger was already running toward the palace. 20 minutes later, Aldrich burst into the healing halls, where Gareth had taken Alara for safety. "Are you hurt?" His voice was barely controlled. His eyes were wild. "I'm fine." Gareth stopped them before. "I'm going to end her," he said, and the flatness in his voice was more terrifying than if he'd shouted. "Cassandra crossed a line. She put hands on what's mine. Aldrich, listen to me. Don't do anything rash. That's what she wants. Then she'll get it." "No." Alara grabbed his arms, forced him to look at her. "You're smarter than that. Don't give her the war she's trying to provoke. She tried to take you, but she didn't. I'm here. I'm safe, and you need to outthink her, not outfight her." The war behind his eyes was terrible to watch. The monster wanted blood. The man wanted her safe. "Please," she said, "come back to me. Don't lose yourself to this." He pulled her against him, buried his face in her hair, and shook with the effort of controlling his rage. But he listened. That night, Aldrich called a council meeting. Not at the palace. At Ravenshield Keep, the family fortress in the mountains. Gareth, the royal steward, the master of coin, and Duke Blackwood himself sat around a table that had seen centuries of negotiations. "Duke Blackwood," Aldrich said, his voice ice, "your daughter attempted to have my personal healer abducted in broad daylight. Explain." The Duke went pale. "Your Majesty, I had no knowledge. Your daughter acts with your authority. Or should I assume you've lost control of your own house? Cassandra is spirited. But she would never—" "She did." Aldrich placed witness statements on the table, signed testimonies from 3 people who saw the attempt. "This is an act of aggression against the crown. Your Majesty, surely we can resolve this without—" "Here is my resolution," Aldrich interrupted. "Your daughter leaves the capital. Today. She goes to your northern estates and stays there. If I see her face within 100 miles of this palace, I will consider it an act of war against my throne. You can't exile a duke's daughter for— I can do whatever I want. I'm the king." Aldrich leaned forward. "But I'm being generous. The alternative is that I charge her with attempted kidnapping of a royal servant and execute her publicly. Your choice." The Duke stared at him, then slowly nodded. "She'll leave by nightfall." "Good," Aldrich stood. "And Duke Blackwood? If anything happens to Alara Ashford, if she trips on the stairs, if she catches a cold, if she stubs her toe, I will assume it came from your house, and I will respond accordingly. Am I clear?" "Perfectly, Your Majesty." 2 days later, Cassandra left the capital in a fury, swearing revenge, making threats that nobody took seriously anymore. And for the first time in months, Aldrich felt like he could breathe. He found Alara in the healing halls, teaching a class on wound treatment to junior apprentices. She looked up when he entered, and her face lit up in a way that made his chest ache. "Your Majesty," she said formally, because they had an audience, but her eyes were warm. "To what do we owe the honor?" "I need to borrow Apprentice Ashford for a moment," he said. "Official business." Master Godfrey grumbled, but waved her away. Aldrich led her to an empty corridor, checked that they were alone, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her. She melted into him, hands fisting in his tunic, standing on her toes to get closer. When they broke apart, she was breathless. "Official business?" she asked. "Very official," he said. "I'm officially in love with you." Her eyes went wide. "Aldrich, I know it's complicated. I know the court will have opinions. I know your apprenticeship is important, and I would never ask you to give it up. But I need you to know that you are the most important thing in my life. More important than the crown. More important than the kingdom. More important than anything. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I love you too, even though you're dramatic and intense and definitely need to learn how to relax. He laughed, a real full laugh that echoed through the empty corridor. And somewhere in that moment, the man with the frozen heart and the woman with the fearless soul created something that neither politics nor power could destroy. 6 months later, on the day Aldrich planned to propose, a ring of white gold and amber waiting in his pocket, a messenger arrived with an urgent letter. Aldrich opened it, read it, went absolutely still. What is it? Alara asked. It's from Lord Theron, my father's murderer. He's been imprisoned in the northern fortress for 12 years. Aldrich's voice was hollow. He's dying, and he says he has information about my father's death. Something I don't know. Something that changes everything. What could possibly change? He won't say in a letter. He wants to tell me in person. Alara took the letter from his shaking hands. Then we go together. This could be a trap. Then we spring it together. He looked at her, this woman who had collapsed at his feet and somehow became the reason he remembered how to be human. Whatever we find, he said, whatever truth is waiting in that fortress, it doesn't change how I feel about you. I know, she said, but you need to hear it anyway. For closure. 3 days later, they rode north to the fortress where traitors were kept. Lord Theron was dying. That much was clear. The man who had once been a powerful noble was now a skeleton in chains. Your Majesty, he wheezed when Aldrich entered his cell. You came. I came for the truth. Nothing else. The truth. Theron laughed, a wet, horrible sound. The truth is that I didn't betray your father. You were caught with the payment, the gold from the assassins. Planted by the real traitor, who needed a scapegoat. Aldrich's blood went cold. Who? Theron's eyes focused on something behind Aldrich. Him. Aldrich turned. Duke Blackwood stood in the doorway, a crossbow in his hands, aimed directly at Alara's heart. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, the Duke said, but you gave me no choice. You exiled my daughter. You humiliated my house, and now you're going to learn that the Blackwoods always collect their debts. You killed my father, Aldrich said, pieces falling into place with horrible clarity. I did, because he refused to marry you to Cassandra. Said you should marry for love, not politics. What a fool. The Duke's finger tightened on the trigger. And now you'll watch the woman you love die the same way he did, slowly, painfully, knowing you couldn't save her. Everything happened at once. Gareth burst through a side door. He'd been waiting in position. Alara dropped to the ground. Aldrich lunged forward. The crossbow fired. The bolt meant for Alara hit Gareth instead, who had thrown himself into its path. Aldrich's fist connected with Blackwood's jaw with the full force of 12 years of rage. The Duke went down and didn't get up. When the dust settled, Gareth was wounded, but alive. Blackwood was in chains, and Aldrich was holding Alara so tight she could barely breathe. I thought I'd lost you, he whispered against her hair. You didn't. I'm here. I'm staying. He pulled back, looked at her with eyes that were wet with unshed tears. Marry me, he said. What? I don't have the ring. It's back at the palace. But I don't care. Marry me. Be my queen. Not because of politics or power, but because I love you, and I can't imagine ruling this kingdom, or living this life, or being this person without you. Alara laughed through her own tears. Yes. Yes, you ridiculous, intense, wonderful man. Yes. He kissed her there in the fortress prison, surrounded by guards and traitors, and the ghosts of his past. And for the first time since his father died, King Aldrich Ravenshield felt free. The wedding happened 3 months later. The entire kingdom attended. Every noble, every merchant, every commoner who could make the journey to the capital. And when Alara Ashford, healer's apprentice from the borderlands, walked down the aisle in a gown of silver and white, Aldrich forgot how to breathe. She was beautiful. She was brave. She was his. I love you, he said when she reached the altar. I love you, too, she said. Now stop looking at me like that, or I'm going to cry. and ruin all the work the maids did on my face." He laughed. The priest performed the ceremony. And when he pronounced them married, when Aldrich kissed his queen in front of the entire kingdom, the crowd erupted in cheers so loud they could be heard all the way to the borderlands. That night, in their chambers, Alara found him on the balcony overlooking the city. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "I'm thinking about the day you collapsed at my feet. About how I almost walked past you, almost let you bleed out on those cobblestones because getting involved wasn't worth the risk. But you didn't. No, I didn't." He turned to face her, took her face in his hands. "You saved me that day, Alara, not the other way around." "We saved each other," she corrected. "That's what love does." And in the capital city of Thornhaven, under a sky full of stars, the heartless king who learned to feel, and the healer who taught him how, began the rest of their lives. Together. Now listen, if you made it this far, you are incredible. Smash that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and drop a comment telling me what you loved most about this story. And if you want more epic medieval romances like this, let me know in the comments below. I love you all. See you in the next one.